Yeah, I was vaguely aware of her, and particularly this thing about stealing diamonds by swallowing them. And I think I'm sure you've probably read somewhere already, but she famously said the safest place anywhere in the world is in my tummy.
Hi, Alex. Nice to meet you. My name is
Nice to
Romina.
meet you too. How are you?
Hi. Fine. I'm with my cat,
Good.
so he's going to be part of this interview.
Oh, hello. What's his name?
Peachy.
Peachy.
Peachy. Yes, that's his
Peachy.
name.
Yeah,
Yes.
great.
We were watching Joan. We saw up to 4 episodes, but
Oh, okay.
unfortunately,
You've seen the first four. Yeah, great.
yeah, I saw the first four. Unfortunately, I was googling about Joan because I never heard of her story. So now I know how it ends. Unfortunately.
Yes. Yes. Right.
I haven't heard about Joan before. Were you involved about her story as a criminal mind in London?
I um I had vaguely heard of her. And I'd certainly heard of some of the people that she was associated with. So the Richardsons, for example, who were the famous London gangsters who kind of took over from the Krays. As the Krays got older, the Richardsons became, and those people who she then became involved with later on in her career, I'd certainly heard of. And yeah, I was vaguely aware of her, and particularly this thing about stealing diamonds by swallowing them, but in a vaguest way. So yeah.
But it's quite interesting because she had actually a really interesting way to do these crimes.
Yeah, totally. And I'm sure you've probably read somewhere already, but she famously said the safest place anywhere in the world is in my tummy.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about the man you play in Joan?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Bernard he's unlike Joan and Boise, he is not a specific real person. He's like an amalgamation of various people, I think. And he is also, in a way, Anna Simon, the writer's kind of response to the Me Too movement and the cases of Harvey Weinstein and those other sort of relatively more recent, well-known cases of that of men who habitually overstep the boundaries, particularly in an employee-employer relationship.
Yeah.
So it was a great way for her to explore those quite contemporary issues, which are coming more to light, but also from a historical perspective, where those kinds of relationships were much more common, and that kind of freedom for a man like Bernard to overstep the appropriate boundaries because he's the boss, right? And he feels like he's entitled to do what he does with Joan. That kind of behaviour in the 70s and the 80s, certainly in the UK, was much more prevalent and much more tolerated by women.
Yeah, I understand.
But he's absolutely a man of his time.
Yeah, he's a kind of man that is a symptom of his time, and you cannot avoid
That's
that.
a really good way of putting it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I saw that, and in a way, you are saying, okay, Joan is doing something bad, but you want something bad to happen to that man. It's kind of inevitable.
Oh, what? You want something bad to happen to Bernard?
Well, I mean, he's not the kind of great man. What
no,
you
he's
say.
not. Exactly.
I mean, I don't know if something bad, but well, she's stealing from him, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why it's such a good show, because you've got all that kind of fun, kind of sexy cops and robbers and gangsters and diamonds and all of that sort of stuff, but you've also got some real moral complexity in there. And Joan is no angel. She's a criminal in her own right, and she's a very, very tough, uncompromising woman. And she's as Sophie said many times, she's a woman in a man's world. But you want her to win. You want her to win partly because she's so impressive and amazing, and her ability to pretend to be other people and disguise herself is so good, and the way she can shift character and therefore the power dynamics in any given situation, but also because of this relationship with her daughter, which is the thing that really holds the whole thing together, I think, and takes it from being just like a gangster's show, which would be fun, into something that's a bit has more depth to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that draws me to a question that what do you think people see in these kind of shows, that they portray these criminals, but they are complex criminals. They are not just bad people. They are doing bad things because for the ones that they love. Do you think that people like about those shows that are so appealing to take on TV?
Well, I think that's life, isn't it? It's, you know, life is not, is very, very rarely is life, you know, good versus evil. It's much more complicated than that. In fact, I've got a 7-year-old, so my youngest son is 7, and he is just getting to the age. He's still just in the age where he thinks it's either goodies or baddies. And he's got an older brother, and we've been watching films with him recently where it's a bit more complicated, you know. And he's saying things like, are they the good guys, are they the bad guys? And we're like, well, it's not like that, you know. So there's a point around about 7, or maybe a little bit older, where you start to realize that life is a bit more nuanced than that, and that's where drama, you know, of all kinds, that's where it works, isn't it? It's a method for human beings to understand the complexities of their own lives by watching the experiences of other people.
Well, Alex, you have played a lot of historical dramas. You have played a lot of characters based on fictional characters, but based on real ones, except on Andor, of course, at least not in this galaxy. How do you feel in those roles? Is something that you aim to do, or something that just happened?
Oh, I think, well, probably a bit of both, really. I mean, I've always been interested, just as a reader and just as a human being. I've always been very interested in history, and so I think I probably am, like, even if it's just subconsciously drawn to those things and those real world things, whether it's stories like the story about Myra Hindley and Lord Longford, or whether it's The Crown, or whether it's I'm really naturally drawn to those worlds where where human beings are faced with complex real world problems. Yeah, definitely, always. Not that doesn't happen in Andor, right? So,
no, well,
I mean, and that's probably why that show was so successful. I think is because you had all of the kudos and the excitement of the Star Wars universe, but presented in a morally complex way, in a sophisticated adult way. Yeah.
Well, you said your character is actually a fictional one that is a bit complex because it's like a mix of different people in Joan's universe. You had your liberties to interpret, to play this role, or you were more like, okay, a bunch of people, a bunch of things to hold on to and portray this character?
No, I was really lucky with this because I was working with people I've worked with before. So Richard, the director, I've worked with before. Anna, I've worked with before, and they have worked together before. We all worked together on a show called Mrs. Wilson with Ruth Wilson. So that gave me a real freedom because I know Richard well, I know Anna, and so it gave me a real sort of confidence and freedom to. And also, Richard is absolutely the best director of actors I've on screen that I've worked with. He's so good at just taking what you're doing already and just encouraging you to push it a little bit further or complete it or round it out in some way. So a lot of that was to do with my relationship with them, I think. So yeah, the combination of the work I did beforehand and the confidence of a strong relationship with those two, particularly Richard. Yeah.
The show does a great job, actually, and recreating the 80s. And I was watching your Instagram. I was scrolling through your Instagram. I saw that you actually loved the interiors and you paid a lot of detail to the things that were happening there when the setup was being representing such a particular time. It's not far away. The 80s are not so far away, but yeah.
No, I really get into that stuff as well. I mean, I was very lucky to do 2 seasons on The Crown where the production design is just amazing. No expenses spared.
Yeah.
You're dealing with huge budgets per episode. And Joan is a big budget show, but it wasn't The Crown. But what was really so impressive about the production design on Joan is the quality of the work and the worlds that were created with, relatively speaking, not enormous amounts of money. So the skill and the craftsmanship and the dedication that all of those people involved in the production design put in to creating those worlds, those environments, those lived environments. It's just amazing. I could spend hours just kind of going. I mean, there's so
I was
many
watching
things
the pictures you took.
I mean, and the shop that was built on set. There's so many bits of it that the audience never get to see. There was a whole sections of it with all kinds of detail in there, but that just only adds to your ability as an actor to be immersed in the environment. Yeah.
Okay, Alex, well, last question because we have to go.
Yeah.
But what was the most exciting thing that you take from the job? Even if it's learning about Joan or working with Sophie, what is that thing that when you wrap up filming, that you say, "Oh, I'm really glad I did this"?
Oh, we've got so many things. I mean, working with Sophie was brilliant. She's extraordinary. She's the most technically gifted actor I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some very, very, very brilliant actors.
Yeah.
And she is absolutely the most technically accomplished actor I've ever worked with. So working with her was brilliant. Working with Richard is a joy. I hope to do that again as soon as possible. And Ruth Kenny Letts, who produced it, just working with that team of people was snowed in and was a real joy. Yeah, fantastic. It was a great working experience.
Okay, Alex, thank you so much for this interview. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure.
Also a big fan of The Crown. So
yes.
It was
I'll tell them. I'll let them know.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Thank you.